Now, should we stop calling people obese? That's right. Give us a call. 0207 862 2222 is the number. NHS staff have been given new guidance by the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, which warns against calling severely overweight people obese. Instead, they have been told to use the phrase people with obesity because it doesn't indicate that that a medical condition is what a person actually is. Will this help people take control of their weight? I'm just going to get a couple of views from you before we hit that break. Angela, what's your thoughts?
I think we need a standardised way for health professionals to be able to gauge whether somebody their weight is going to put them, it's going to compromise their health and their well-being.
Do you not have BMI for that?
No, BMI has been discredited because you can have a high BMI because you've got strong, heavy muscle mass as opposed to because you're carrying fat. And we know all the systemic illnesses that are related to obesity, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, etc. And we cannot pussyfoot around it by saying, well, because it's got negative connotations and it's pejorative and it might offend people. We're not looking to humiliate anybody, and lots of people have an addictive relationship with food, and it's difficult for them to lose weight. But equally, there has to be an acknowledgement that obesity has to be somehow, as I say, standardised. Otherwise, what do we do about type 2 diabetes? Also often a result of a certain type of lifestyle. Do we kind of cosy it and sort of pussyfoot around how we describe type 2 diabetes? It's a term for the fact that your body's malfunctioning because of what you're putting in it.
Language matters. What we call ourselves, what people call us, what professionals are allowed to say, what you get called in a schoolyard for if you are overweight or not matters. When I used to do stuff for the United Nations, I was told explicitly that it was around disability justice that you describe people as persons with disabilities because they're not disabled people, they're people that have disabilities. Language matters so fundamentally, and this is far more important than we give it credit for.
All right, don't go anywhere because we're taking your calls on this right after this break. Ian from Staffordshire, what's your thoughts?
Hi, Storm.
Hiya.
And I'm obese, and it really upsets me when people call me obese. They call me fat. I get called lardy.
Okay. But hold on, Ian. You started the conversation by saying, and I quote, "I am obese." You didn't say, "I am a person with obesity," which is what the NHS would like you to start saying.
Well, I wouldn't like it. My BMI was 37. Now, I'm disabled and I have to go everywhere in an electric wheelchair. And I was 17 stone 6. I'm now 14 stone 10.
Well done.
And I need to lose 9 more pounds, and then I'll be classed as overweight.
Okay.
And it's just so much nicer. I don't mind being called overweight, but when you get called obese...
Okay, but Ian, we have to have a distinction between being overweight and then getting to a stage where it's having an impact, a morbid impact on your health, I suppose, Ian. So it's just a way of categorising that increase in weight. And I understand it's much nicer to hear that you're overweight rather than obese, but I suppose it is the language that we're using. When I say to you, you are suffering with obesity or you have obesity, does that make it feel more manageable than if I was to say you are an obese person?
It's nicer.
It's softer.
Definitely
and
nicer.
But I understand why you don't like all the other words. They're just nasty, Ian, and people shouldn't be using that. And well done for losing all that weight. Not easy, I think, especially when you use a wheelchair as well. Thank you very much for your call. Margaret from Blackpool, what's your thoughts on this? Do we need to change our language? Ian says it feels nicer to him.
Yes, good morning. Lovely programme. It's amazing. I'm so glad that you said, when the gentleman said, I am obese, I'm the opposite end of the spectrum. I'm what I always say, thin. But I shouldn't be saying that, Dawn. I should actually be saying I am who I am, what I am. Because thin people or people that are very slim have the same problem. People keep saying, oh, you're too thin, you're so thin, you look unwell. And that is detrimental to somebody's confidence also.
I can
So it's
understand that
not
actually.
just,
From the opposite end of
it's
things.
not just
I'm wondering though, Margaret,
obesity.
whether you've been told by a medical professional that your weight is unhealthy. Because lots of people are thin, they naturally don't carry that much weight, or they don't eat that much, but they're naturally quite thin, but they're still healthy. And then you slip into a category where you're underweight. Is that where you are, Margaret? Medically speaking?
No, I'm sorry to interrupt. No, I'm perfectly healthy.
Okay.
I've got quite low blood pressure. Everything's okay.
Great.
And the doctor is happy with me. It's just so hurtful when people say, you are so thin, it's ridiculous.
I think, Margaret, respectfully, I think there's a difference between people who offer you uninvited opinions about the way you look when you know you're healthy, you eat a healthy diet and good for you to do. I don't mean that in a patronising way. I mean it because not everybody has the willpower or the common sense to eat well. But I think that is quite different from a medical person, a clinician, saying to a person, I think you are too thin, or I think you are carrying too much weight, you're obese. They're not doing it in order to reinforce a stereotype. They're not trying to make a pejorative statement. They're doing it because there are medical consequences of not being within the realms of a healthy weight unless it is managed. Now, in Margaret's case, I wouldn't presume to know your background, but if the doctor's happy with you, there's no reason why the rest of the world shouldn't be happy with you.
The new guidance from NICE isn't saying don't say the word obesity. It's saying decenter the word obesity from how you describe a person. NICE are not saying get rid of the word obesity, ban the word obesity, or thin or whatever it might be. We're just saying, and their advice is a good one, is don't make the person the illness. And that makes absolute sense to me.
So let's take it for... Margaret, I'm taking you out of this because you are not unhealthily underweight. You are perfectly healthy and your doctor's fine. So really, I think Angela's right. People are making comments on your weight. They just shouldn't. It's just inappropriate and you're well within your rights to say, excuse me, your opinion is irrelevant. But Margaret, thank you very much for calling and bringing actually the other side of things to our attention as well, because we could say the same thing for someone that suffers from anorexia. Are they anorexic or do they suffer from anorexia? Would we use the same distinction between those two?
The language matters immensely. So we no longer say that someone is an addict, a heroin addict or anything like that. We say someone who's suffering from active addiction. The reason is listen, I know you might think that it's superfluous or silly or that everyone's being a bit, frivolous about it all, but it matters. What we call ourselves matters. And this kind of language that's perpetuated, whether we like it or not, if the doctor describes you as obese, anyone else who's using the street might hurl that to you as an insult. So language matters. It's not, that's not up for question. How we use it is what we're discussing here.
No, but I think respectfully, you are entirely wrong in the basis of your thesis because you're assuming that this is about stereotyping and trying to reinforce a negative view. If people are morbidly overweight and carry a massively increased chance of getting illnesses that are going to hugely compromise their lifestyle, make them very poorly, and also the implications for the cost to the NHS, then it needs to be recognised so it can be categorised, standardised, and the correct treatment can be doled out. And all this kind of pussyfooting around is just stupid.
Pete from Lincolnshire, what's your thoughts on this? Is somebody obese or is someone suffering with obesity?
Well, it depends on how you go on it. I'm going back a few years and I was overweight. And I went into a pub and I was told by somebody, you are a big fat so-and-so, blah, blah, blah. And I just looked and said, hang on, in 12 months' time, if I go on a diet, I'll be thin. It'll take you a damn sight longer to get beautiful. And the amount of trouble that caused, that went haywire. And everybody in the pub agreed with me.
Okay, and I think
why take insults?
I think everybody in the pub would be right. What we're talking about here is medical professionals. We're not talking about horrible, ugly people down the pub. And when I say ugly, I mean personality-wise. We are talking about medical professionals that have to give you a medical diagnosis. Do they say to you, Pete, now I don't know whether you do fall into the obese category or not, you say you're overweight, do they say to the individual, you are obese? Or do they say to the individual, you have obesity? We don't say you are
Telling you
cancer or
privately
you
is
are,
different.
you know, there's other things that we wouldn't associate with being a characteristic of an individual, and yet there are some that we do. And why?
But if they tell you privately you are overweight, you're fat, you're whatever, and you need to do this, if you don't do it and you're healthy, as far as I'm concerned, I can still walk from A to B. I can still do that, and everything else, and do what I used to be doing. Well, most things that I used to do when I was 40. So I'm now coming on 69, but it comes under the crunch. Whereas if you can still do it, even if you were 2, 3, 10 stone overweight, if you're still doing the same as you were doing 20 odd years ago, what's the problem?
Well, hopefully, Pete, you'll stay in good health, and I certainly like the way you were rapping on Winston Churchill there. But unfortunately, we know the data shows the cumulative damage that being obese or having obesity issues does, and therefore, I think we need the clarity within the medical world to say this is an issue, this is a problem.
All right, Pete, thank you very much for your call.